So this is about the research behind finding the mutation for the Hoof Wall Separation Disease. And there were a lot of people who were involved with this, and most of the people here probably don't know who it was. So in all fairness to the people who did all the work, we're going to name them at long last. Okay, so the incentive for everyone that was on this, in this Connemara Pony research group, was that they had personal experience with having animals born with the mutation. And the whole aim from the start was that they didn't want any more ponies being born with the problem. So here's a list of all the people in the CPRG, and they are listed purely on alphabetical order of their country of origin. Got nothing to do with who did what or how much input each one of them had. Some of you may recognise Darian Hall because she's the owner of Rosewood Witchcraft, who became our poster pony on Facebook with her journey from diagnosis to her eventual euthanasia because of Hoof Wall. So this photo was taken at Clifden in August, and that's some of us that were there, and here is Carrie Finno and her husband Scott, and we've got Fiona and Finola, Benno from Germany, Jocelyn from Canada, Ray Knightley from Germany, Karen Vincencio, she's American living in Ireland, Penny Huggins from Canada, and here's Ingrid from New Zealand and myself from New Zealand. So we had a couple in the photos there that were part of our support group, but we're part of the CPRG. So the issue that's been happening is there's a group of people who have been very concerned about the whole Hoof Wall issue because they think it's devaluing the breed in the eyes of prospective breeders or buyers. So we're going to deal with this first. Now, what we have to be aware of is that there's an alphabet soup of genetic diseases that are already acknowledged and testable for in horses and ponies around the world. And most of them have arisen because either of deliberate inbreeding for specific traits or because the population was already small to start with and has become further compressed. So some of the disease mutations have actually spread into the general horse population because of crossbreeding. So part of our alphabet soup is HYPP. Now, does anyone here know what HYPP is? Well, it's the hyperkalemic periodic paralysis disease, and what happens is the muscles build up too much potassium and they continue to contract. Now, interestingly enough, at the Clifden meeting, I asked the same question, and I had one person put their hand up to say they knew what HYPP was. They came up to me afterwards and said, I only know about it because I have the human equivalent. Okay? But it's found in quarter horses, paints, and Appaloosas. We've got herder, which is where the connective tissue between the skin and the rest of the body is weak. And so the skin sloughs off if there's any pressure put on the skin. It's found in quarter horses, paints, and Appaloosas. We've got skids, which is like born with no immune system functioning. Arabs and Arabian derivatives. And interestingly enough, just in the last 2 weeks, a report came through from Australia of a pony that has only got 1.5% Arabian blood in it and is actually a carrier for skids. So it's gotten out really big into the outside horse world now. So we've got lavender foal syndrome, where the foals are born with peculiar colour and an assorted anomaly of immune function disorders. Once again, it's Arabs and Arabians. PSSM, what we now know causes a lot of the tying up and sore backs, and it's actually polysaccharide storage myopathy, which means that the glycogen in that's stored in the muscles for energy for movement isn't forming in the long chains, it's forming in branches and it can't be broken down. So we've got draft breeds in general, gypsy cobs and warm bloods. And in the US, the gypsy cobs, over 60% of them are now testing as having PSSM. We've got Myotonia of New Forest ponies, the specific breed, and we have the Fell Pony syndrome, and that's in the Fells and Dales ponies. So when we look at this list, we've got HWSD at the moment. Compared to what these other diseases cause, HWSD is an issue, but it's not killing things at birth like some of these others. Okay, so I'm talking about HYPP because it's the widest known genetic disease, and it came from one horse called Impressive. And the HYPP mutation results in double muscling. So, and the Americans like it. They want to see this in their horses. So as a result, Impressive was inbred to in a big way. And that's what you get. They actually find this appealing. Okay? That's a mare with a foal behind it. So Herder came from one horse called Poca Bueno. And here's a picture of a horse with Herder, and you can see it's had its saddle on and all the skin is falling away from the body. So, but the thing is, what we have to understand is that with some genetic diseases, the carrier state can actually be an advantage, and this is one of the things with Herder. There is extensive research having been done that shows that the Herder horses, because they have greater elasticity, or the carrier state has greater elasticity in their connective tissue, their tendons are actually more effective, and they turn out to be the better performance horses. So in the US, they actually they're quite happy to breed the carrier state of Herder horses. They just make sure they don't breed a homozygous or having two copies of the gene. And the same thing with the Myotonia of New Forest ponies. They found the same thing with those. They can, if they have a carrier state, they have better performance. So you can see why these carrier states become more widespread in a population, because the people are breeding for performance, and backing on the performance comes the carrier gene for whatever whatever condition we're talking about. But conversely, it might be because they have that condition that they are better performance ponies. So we don't know, it's a chicken and egg situation. So specifically in Herder and Myotonia, there's definitely no doubt that they have got superior performance in the carrier state. Any link there might be between HWSD and superior performance needs to be scientifically investigated. But at the moment, it would appear that the performance lines have a higher incidence of HWSD in them than the non-performance lines. So, since the closing of the Connemara stud book and the exclusion of purebred ponies via inspection, the gene pool's been grossly truncated. Now the situation in Ireland up until the mid-2000s was that every pony to go into the stud book had to be inspected. And if they didn't get into the stud book, their breeding was totally wiped. They no longer existed as a Connemara pony. So because the inspection has always been very political, there's a lot of really good genes have been lost, and as a result, the gene pool's been totally compressed. Okay, and then we also get the situation, especially in Ireland, where they've overused popular size. So you'll get the Clifden winner getting a large proportion of mares the following season, regardless of whether or not that was the best cross for the mares. He'd won, so therefore his progeny would be considered to be more marketable. So at the moment, the situation we have with Hoof Wall is only the tip of the iceberg, because we do know there are a couple of other genetic conditions lurking in the Connemara gene pool. Okay, we've got to be really careful if we don't want them to also take precedence. So, how long has it been around? This is a question that I would get asked on a regular basis. Okay, so the pedigree mapping that was done as part of my research indicates that the problem was already in the ponies before the start of the stud book in 1924. And the reason for that is because by pedigree mapping I was able to establish that there were 4 implicated mares in the diffusion of the mutation through the wider population. And 3 were in the first volume of the stud book, and 2 of them have no recorded breeding, so we don't know what breeding was for them. And the 3rd has only got a sire listed. And the 4th mare is a granddaughter of one of the mares mentioned in 3. So we have got these 4 mares. And all 3 of the mares left popular stallion sons, and one has left multiple grandsons. And 2 of the mares were exported in foal to the USA. So who are they? We've got Dooher Lass, Ballahinch Grey, the Taurine Pet, they are the 2 that went to the USA, and Dolan Rose. So Dooher Lass is the dam of Inishgoil Laddie, Ballahinch Grey, Jiminy Cricket, Taurine Pet, Montully Man, and Dolan Rose, McDara. So people who know the early pedigrees in the stud book will start to see a pattern. Okay, we have one stallion who's out of a mare of unknown breeding, and we consider him to be an outlier because all we know is that he's out of a mare called Unknown Colleen, and the sire line appears to be free of Hoof Wall. So this stallion, Roundstone Chief, he's produced carrier ponies in 3 different countries from mare lines which appear to be free of HWSD, so that fingers him to being a carrier. But his influence has been restricted due to geographical isolation. What we see further on is what it's actually done to the carrier states in the countries where he stood. Okay, but the other lines are spread right around the world, and the most influential ones in Inishgoil Laddie. He's got 5 recorded male progeny, 3 stallion sons, 2 gelding sons, and all 3 stallions are implicated as lines of descent. So 57 recorded female progeny. This is the thing, we have to be careful here, you see, because we've got 57 recorded progeny, but this was before the stud book was closed. And it's quite probable that he had heaps of progeny out there that are not recorded because they didn't pass inspection, but they were still bred from, and their children, their daughters, then went on to pass inspection. So this is why it's probably a lot wider than just the stats. Okay, but if we look at the 57 recorded progeny, 32 have no foals recorded, and 25 daughters have 1 or more foals, and 16 out of those 25 are implicated as lines of descent for Hoof Wall. So we're running just over our 50% that we would expect to get of carrier progeny. So 64% of the daughters are implicated as carriers, and 100% of the sons. So here we have a diagram of Inishgoil Laddie and his progeny. So we've got Gil, Keyhorn Laddie, Taurine Laddie. So there are the 3 stallion sons that are implicated. And then we have the mares. Now they haven't all produced the same number of progeny, and their influence has not been as great as each other. Some of them are more influential. the first slide I showed you was the pedigree mapping that went on as a result of the original 18 ponies that were used in the UEC Davis Guas. So they were proven ponies with the foot issue, and they were the ones that we used to actually find the mutation. Now we have the test, and people have been publishing the results of the VGL testing. We have more of Inishkualedi female progeny showing up as being implicated in lines of descent. So that's these ones down here. So, of the 25 progeny by Inishkualedi that are implicated, there's 4 that are very, very strong, have a very strong influence in disseminating it. So we've got Gil, he's a stallion. Keyhorn Laddie, Taurine Laddie, and Irene. Irene's the mare, got 3 stallions. So here's Gil. And these are his progeny that have bred on, because obviously he's had other progeny that didn't breed on, but these are the ones that have got progeny, have bred on. So the first one is Cameron Silla. She's a mare. We have Kilkerran, who's a stallion, and Tiger Gill, who's also a stallion. Keyhorn Laddie. His influence has actually been through the mares, because he doesn't have any stallion sons. And it's these 2. Now, interestingly, the Sparrow line is one of the top performance lines in Connemara's. Taurine Laddie is an interesting one, because his influence has actually been more in America. So every one of the ones on this here are ponies that have produced carrier ponies. And Taurine Pet here was one of the mares that was exported, and she was exported in foal to Tully Lad. And interestingly enough, when I did the original mapping for the 18 ponies, there was obviously a lot of American ponies in there, and the initial results looked like Tully Lad was implicated in being a hoof wall pony. But with the additional information that's come through since, it wasn't him, it was the mares, because the only 2 progeny that he has had that are hoof wall ancestors were the 2 that got exported to America and foal to him. One of the big issues is Taurine Ross, and that's because of Bridge Boy. Bridge Boy is a very heavily used sire in America, in Ireland rather. So Irene, she's the mare, and she had 4 progeny, one of which was exported to the USA, and she went on to produce this mare here, Loise Colleen, and Loise Colleen has got a daughter who's a carrier. So the most influential ones are over here. So we've got Fort Finine, who's a stallion. Fort Irene is a mare, and then there's a stallion Thunderbolt. We've got Bridge Boy, and he's got 305 progeny that are actually recorded, once again before the stud book was closed. So statistically, 50% of these are going to be carriers. So all 4 foals of Irene have appeared to produce carrier offspring, and because of this 100% score rate, I would suspect that Irene herself was an affected pony. We've got Dolan Rose, she's the last of our mares. through Ericsby Rose and her daughters, we've got quite a dissemination because there's a Ericsby Rose has left several stallion sons as well, and the other one is Magdara. Beautiful stallion, if anyone's seen any photos of him, and once again performance line. Bellhinch Grey, this Jiminy Cricket is the stallion by Tully Ladd. He left a big family in Niue. So what does it all mean? So the initial hypothesis that we had when we only had 18 affected ponies to work from has been supported by the information that's come through from all the testing that's happened subsequently. So this is using the publicly available information. The hypothesis is basically being sustained. So just to show you what can happen is with 4 ponies of the original 18, we generate the following information, and it just shows you potentially how widely spread the mutation is in the greater Connemara gene pool. And it also shows why we must not exclude ponies that are carriers from breeding. We must keep them in the gene pool. So the affected pony 1 was bred in Ireland and exported to Sweden. And it was euthanized because of HWSD. The sire of this pony stands in Ireland, and he has 13 stallion sons, 10 of which are in Ireland, 1's in France, and 1 is in the USA, and is actually, the one in the USA here is the sire of Rosewood Witchcraft, our poster child. And there's 1 in Finland. He's got 132 daughters, of which 128 in Ireland, 3 in the UK, 1 in Sweden. Now the interesting thing is that the dam is in Ireland, and she's got 10 foals. 2 are proven and tested HWSDs. 2 are proven carriers. And one of the carriers is a S1 stallion, and he's the sire of 3 affected ponies in North America because he was actually exported to America, used in America and Canada, and then re-imported back to Ireland. So he has also got 45 progeny in Ireland. And the other hoof status of this mare's other 6 foals we don't know. However, when we were on our bus trip before the Clifden show, we saw one of the sons of this particular mare, and all the CPRGP members looked at the feet and went, yeah, we recognised it. But that horse is not listed in this analysis. Okay, so pony 1, through the sire half siblings and the dam siblings, has 202 close relations. And statistically 50% of them are going to be carriers or affected. So once again, this pony 2 was born in Ireland and exported to Sweden. This person who bought these 2 ponies got 100% affected without realising it. So the sire of this pony's got 5 stallion sons in France and has actually stood in France himself. He's 134 daughters, 29 in Ireland, 2 in the UK, and 103 in France. He's got 2 daughters in Ireland. So then we go on to ponies 3 and 4. They were bred in Denmark, and the sire is an English bred sire, and the 2 mares share a common grandsire. And one of them is the sponsor for the hoof plate that's sitting on the table there. Okay, so that pony is donor, yes, is one of these ones that I mentioned here. Okay, so this stallion has got 17 daughters in Ireland and 3 class 1 stallions. got 4 daughters in the UK and 1 gelded son, which also has progeny. So he was used as a stallion and has been gelded. And in Denmark, he's got 40 daughters and 2 stallion sons. After Denmark, he was exported to Sweden, where he has produced some progeny but has since been gelded. And in Finland, he's got 19 daughters. So from 3 sires of 4 affected ponies, we get 26 stallions, 344 daughters. So statistically, 50% of them are going to be carriers or affected. And from the 3 stallions alone, there are now 185 potential carrier breeding ponies in the Connemara pony population in Ireland, UK, several EU countries and North America. A brief summary, derived from only 4 ponies, it shows the potential number of hoof wall carrier ponies in the worldwide population. And now we're getting publication of test results, it's become obvious that hoof wall is spread much wider in the population than most people realise. So here's a few stats, and this is all subsequent to the meeting at Clifden, because one of the questions I was asked there was what were the latest statistics, and they didn't come through in time for the Clifden meeting, so I'm adding them on to the end of this presentation. So what we've seen here is in 6 weeks from the time the testing became commercially available, we had 400 or just under 400 ponies tested. In the 6 months subsequent, we've only had 250 ponies tested. This is worldwide. So there was a big rush on at first, and then it slackened off quite dramatically. And it's quite interesting to note that the proportions aren't changing that much. So down here, in this tiny blue bit here, which you can hardly see, is the number of affected ponies. This is our carrier population. It's percentage. So these 2 here are percentages, whereas these ones are actual numbers. So what I've done here is I have actually put, I know it looks a very busy graph, so I'm going to explain it. Each country has got 3 different sections. So the first section was the initial 6 weeks, right, of testing. This is the 6 months, and this one here is the combined total of both of them. And so you can see over here, for instance, the US has done more testing than everybody else. Well, you can see down here in France, they've done less testing than everybody else. But you also have to take it into consideration what total populations are. So here's New Zealand. We don't look like we've got that many, but how big is our total population? You compare that to Ireland, they haven't done many, and yet think of their total population. We're talking, 3,000 foals a year. So just in 3 years they would have 9,000 foals, and they've managed to test just over 40 ponies. So there's been much greater uptake of the science in the likes of the US and New Zealand and Australia, and possibly Germany's got a small population, but they've tested heaps. So the 3 countries that produce the most ponies have actually been the poorest when it comes to testing them. So this is looking at just the last 6 months. So this is just splitting them out into countries. So it's purely just NN to carrier state to affected. When we start looking at as individual populations, as opposed to across the board, this is what we see. And this was what I was expecting to see. So it's interesting that the stats are actually filling in with what.
Now start it again.
Okay, that's not a very valid figure, because the New Zealand ponies were involved in the initial research as controls, and all the old bloodlines have all come through as clear of HWSD, and this figure here reflects the imports since 2005. So, once again, we just, this is percentages, not actual numbers. So we have our total number of ponies tested, and then the number of carriers and affecteds. So this isn't numbers, this is percentages of the population. And I think I've put this in twice. But anyway, this is a percentage of carriers within the population that has been tested. So, this little busy graph here is looking at the original statistics. So we've got our grand total of number of ponies tested. It's been broken down into mares and, stallions and mares. And this little green bit here, the number who've actually sent in their results and had them reported. Okay, so this one here is an anomalous. It's easy to get 100% when you've only tested 2 ponies and are sent in the results for 2 ponies. But when you get over to here, where there's 147 ponies in the United States have actually been tested, but only 30% of those results have been made public. Okay? But it's just interesting to see the difference in the levels of reporting. So the green one is a percentage, and it's quite high. I mean, 60% of the whole 53 ponies that were tested in Ireland have actually publicly posted their results. So the take-home message is that other breeds have multiple genetic diseases to contend with, and these diseases have not resulted in the end of the breed, and it hasn't brought the breed into disrepute. Last year in the USA, they registered 150,000 quarter horse foals. HYPP and herder has not killed the breed. Okay? That's what we need to try and get through. So, and the thing is that these other breeds are quite open that they have got a problem, and they require their breeding stock to be tested. Because then, if you know what you're doing, good management will sort the problem out. We have to retain the carriers for breeding. If they're good enough to breed from in the first place, then one gene does not suddenly turn them into no good for breeding. You just have to be canny about what you do. If you've got a carrier, you make sure you breed it to an NN. Being open and honest and transparent in your dealings when you're breeding horses, it earns and retains respect of other people. If you've got a good reputation, you'll enhance it by testing your ponies. And we're already seeing that people are still prepared to buy carrier ponies, but not until they know what the status is. So carrier state themselves is not stopping sales from going through. People who refuse to test their ponies is stopping sales from going through. So the message is to test is best, because by that way you are protecting your investment in your ponies.